Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast, Videocast. I've got Jimmy Hutton.
All right.
Phil Attridge.
Hi.
And Stuart Lockhead.
Hello.
I'm Norrie Stewart. We're going to kind of follow the same pattern. We're going to have a look at the First Minister's press conference. And then there's various things we want to look at. George Kerevan's got a piece about future leadership, which is pertinent, I suppose, with the Labour Party and the Tory Party swapping leaders quite recently. What was the other thing? Sorry, I've fucking deeds mince.
We've got Kenny McAskill saying that it's impossible to have a referendum this year, but he explains quite simply.
Oh, and we didn't really talk much about the panel-based poll, did we, yesterday in the Times? Might be worth a mention. But what we're going to do to save the ears of our listeners is we're going to kind of split into two halves. The second half, we're going to have a chat about the Salmond Sturgeon kind of thing. So I'll give you a warning in case you want to jump out at that point, listeners. So let's go with Nicola's press conference. Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, I dipped in and out of it. I'm kind of tired of hearing the same old, can you vaccinate better than somebody else can vaccinate questions, because the desperate reality is it doesn't matter that much. The vaccine's going to get out, and we're going to get out as quick as we possibly can. Whether we have the approval of the press is neither here nor there. And frankly, they're all just desperately trying, like they always do, trip somebody up, come up with some kind of division to create a story. I would imagine that if they don't hit their targets, they'll be very bloody close to them. So it would be nice if the press would shut up and let them get on with it, but that's not going to happen, is it?
I'm pretty sure with the British government controlling the supply of vaccine that they won't get ahead of England.
No.
Well, I was, again, listening to it. It sounds confident, same as every day. And actually, it does what it says on the tin. This morning, I got this blue envelope through the letterbox telling me I'm getting my COVID in 2 weeks. Time to apply for it. And I'm just over the 70. So that sounds pretty well on target.
Stuart won't have had his yet because there's a conspiracy.
No, I haven't got my letter yet. You got a blue envelope. And that's it. You see, that was the most exciting thing, the news we heard about the vaccination program was that the BBC apparently were headlining yesterday that people, it was one of these fake news headlines. And it was cleverly written so that it says the Scottish government had to backtrack on their plans to vaccinate the over 70s. And the way it was written, you would have thought, oh, they over optimistically said they will do something and they're not going to manage it. Yeah, do you know what they couldn't manage? They couldn't manage to put the bloody letters in blue envelopes, but the BBC managed to make the headline sound as though they couldn't manage to do the bloody job.
Actually, I never bothered the colour of the envelope, but I tell you what I did notice, and you know this bit, control freakery, we are going to keep it on target. Now, my date is on the 10th of February, not 1 o'clock or 10 past 1 of that. No, it's 13:08. So I don't know how many they're going to do to be 1300 and 1310. You probably got 2 minutes, Jag, off you go, 2 minutes.
They time you, they get 8 minutes gap. I heard about this already. Apparently that's the time they take for a Jag now.
I'm a bit disappointed that a confirmed Labourite like you didn't get 13:14, but never mind.
Nice one, Jimmy. Nice one.
Well, look, we did hear some cautious good news because the infection rate was quite low, below 1,000. In fact, it was so low in the Edinburgh area, Lothian, that we never even got a specific mention for the first time in weeks. And the headline was grounds for cautious optimism. Might even go on the headline of today's.
Well,
program.
cautious optimism that in 2 weeks, the numbers in hospital will start to drop.
Yeah, that's
So,
the issue here. We still have another week, probably, of pretty dire numbers in terms of hospitalisations, but the actual infection number has been steadily been downwards for a couple of weeks now. So that is grounds for cautious optimism.
I was struck by the preamble, I think we'll call it that, on BBC One with Gary Robertson, who is their favourite attack dog. He should have SNPbaad tattooed, I guess, on his forehead. He led the show with his sidekick Lindsay Bewes. Now she's cool, calm. I mean, she looks like a newsreader.
Aye, she's all right.
Yeah, but she always just comes across as like a newsreader, and she never even doesn't even get flustered waiting for the First Minister to appear at the podium. She's very good. Anyway, what was different for a change? They had a guy on from BBC London, and Gary Robertson was asking. Basically, it was comparing Scotland to London for a change, and it's a very different picture than Scotland and England. After all, London is completely different from Scotland. Obviously, Scotland's a rural country, and London's a metropolis, but it's not 10 times bigger. And things are pretty desperate in London. 8,000 in hospital in London. How many is in hospital in this country? 2,000. Their infection rate is 1,000 per 100,000. What's our infection rate?
Less than 200. It's about 190, isn't it?
Well,
and we also discovered an economic point that I've been trying to draw out of people for quite a while. There are two big economic drivers in London. One of them's the City of London, and the other one is Heathrow and Gatwick. And we touch on it now and again. The guy from BBC London said that the unemployment rate in the southeast of England is highest near Heathrow and Gatwick. They're enormous employers.
okay, guys, have a think about that. I want to compare Scotland to an area in the UK where I can get a fair, reasonable, sensible, honest comparison. I wouldn't pick London.
No, two Scotlands in one city. It's population and it's like a beehive, or like these things where you see swarms. I mean, sorry, even the busiest day here are in Street.
Pick where you would rather be, Scotland or London during a pandemic, for reasons you can do nothing about.
Well, and it was interesting in the sense that the BBC London guy was pointing out that the different boroughs have got different situations. And your outer boroughs tend to be, as you possibly know, they tend to be Tory. And they have a different attitude to lockdowns than the central boroughs, apart from Westminster and,
If you were going to pick anywhere, probably some of the conurbations around the northwest of England. If you're looking at cities comparable to Scotland in size.
Yeah.
That would be fair enough.
What, maybe Newcastle?
Yeah, the northeast is more comparable.
Northwest.
No, it's too big a conurbation. It's actually bigger than London. If you take Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, it's bigger than London.
We always try just no bothering to compare us with England.
I get fed up with all the comparisons with England.
They've got
I think they're great when we're winning.
No, but they've got a ludicrously right-wing government where you still have the Prime Minister hinting that he's going to be looking at relaxing regulation, whereas he's got other voices from his cabinet going out and saying that they might tighten it. And that is deliberate. At least in Scotland, you don't have that kind of forked-tongue response.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I'm fed up watching. Sorry, Nori.
I noticed, what's his name on Sky chased away one of the government ministers when he started asking her questions.
Oh.
God, what's his name? Do you know who?
Which one? The Scottish guy, Neil.
Adam Bolton.
No, the guy we hate, but is doing a really good job asking questions of the government.
Piers Morgan.
Piers Morgan.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But she actually did it quite well. She got fed up with the questioning and decided She had another interview to go to and switched him off.
All right, all right. Who was that?
The woman,
Teresa Coffey.
that's the one.
That's it.
Aye.
Oh,
So
Oh,
the-
you've got to
only-
have seen the Janie Godley Burns thing about Burns.
Nope.
No, okay, I'll leave that one out until somebody's seen it. Somebody else has seen it.
The outstanding question today, I think, was from the Express. Can you tell us when the pandemic's going to end so we know when IndyRef 2 is going to take place? Yes, of course, I'll tell you exactly when the pandemic's going to end.
Will it be when the WHO decide it's over?
Well,
That's about 10 years.
I can't tell you when I'm going to open schools again. How can I tell you when the pandemic's going to end? That's obviously looking for the headline that's tying her to somebody else's decision about the end of the pandemic.
I think they have a competition to see who can be the biggest twat of the week, and the boy for the Express was just trying to get in early and lead the pack. Because normally it's that we dip it for the Sun. You know what I mean? Whoever asks the questions for the Sun's usually going to get twat of the week. But I think the Express are just hacked off. They want it this week desperately.
George Kerevan's piece, seeing as we're talking about Nicola anyway, George has pointed out the obvious, that at some point the SNP are going to need a new leader, whether it's sooner or later is up to time, I suppose. And he's put forward a few names. Top of his list, I don't think top of his list in popularity, but
Not what he wants.
top of his list
definitely
in the chronological sweep of his article was Angus Robertson, followed closely by Joanna Cherry. So have we any thoughts on what we'd like to see?
Well, I'd start with what George says. First up is Angus Robertson. Doesn't reckon he's got, he lacks charisma. And don't forget, I thought this was fairly, he stuck the knife into Angus Robertson. It says, after all, Robertson lost his Murray's seat to Douglas Ross.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cracker.
I don't think he's right about him lacking charisma.
But I don't like him, but he's very efficient. And he will fight dirty. Then you got Kate Forbes and Hamza Yusuf. He suggests those two, but they would. I like the way he put it. He said he put the SNP into the hands of the millennial generation. I'm not sure if there's any of us here want that. Jimmy?
I don't think there's a competition between Hamza and Kate. I think Kate walks it at the moment. Jimmy?
Yeah. Well, she does, but they're both too young. They're both too inexperienced to lead the
Kate
party.
Forbes, definitely.
Frankly, it would just, at the appointment of either of them, would just split the party asunder, because we don't know enough about where they sit on many of the things that drive the party. Hamza strikes me as a bit of a fence sitter, and as I've said before, the more I read about his missus, it strikes me that she's the clever one and he's just the forward-looking face of that partnership. I'd far rather she stepped forward out of the darkness and actually became.
She's standing this time, isn't she?
No, I didn't think she got selected as a candidate.
Did she not?
Which is a shame given her talent.
Well, look, George actually just, essentially his article just poses Angus Robertson against Joanna Cherry, to be honest. That's what it really boils down to. And she says, Joanna Cherry is dynamic, charismatic, one of the SNP stars at Westminster, but there lies her Achilles heel. She's marooned politically on the green benches in London, and it would allow Angus Robertson to make mischief.
It would depend.
That's assuming that Angus Robertson wins Edinburgh Central, of course.
And I don't think that's a given.
I didn't think that's a given either. He's very much a Marmite character, and frankly, there's a lot of activists within the SNP in Edinburgh that will not go out and campaign for that man. So I think he's got quite a battle on his hands to win that seat.
Well, I think one of the things is George really slates him as a tartan Tory in a way. He's right wing, believes in all the right wing. He's a neoliberal. That's where George is coming for him. There, read some of the sub bits inside it. Whereas Joanna Cherry, I think what you see is what you get. A bit more open. Definitely seems more trustworthy to me.
Is it fair to say Joanna Cherry is a bit young as well politically?
She may be a bit inexperienced, but I actually quite like that because she's got real world experience. She's not been a politician for most of her life. She was a practicing lawyer for some considerable time, and no a practicing lawyer in the Nicola Sturgeon mode of I'll sit in Govan Law Centre until somebody gets me a seat in politics. She actually went into court and won cases. She worked for one of Scotland's major companies dealing with a lot of Scotland's major lawsuits over the years.
I worry a bit. I mean, I do like Joanna Cherry, but I worry a bit that everything I've seen her do, she's done through the courts. Maybe she's the leader we need for the argument we're going to have in court about a second referendum. But,
like you, Norrie, I have a lot of time for Philippa Whitford. I mean, it was a couple of weeks ago you said you'd love to see an amalgam of the two of them, because I'd love to see. They've both got great minds, but Philippa strikes you as the Boudica type. She'd jump in a chariot and race down to London to run over Boris Johnson and reverse back over him again just to make sure.
And she would have a lot of weaponry to deploy.
Can I state the obvious here? Right? She's a QC. She's not just a solicitor or anything. She's a QC. To become a QC, quite political, and then actually have a look at the complexion of political parties elected in parliaments and look at the percentage that are solicitors and QCs.
You'll forgive me, Phil.
Background in is a political, and believe me, I think she's pretty adept at just the regular tribal infighting, you know. But yeah, definitely.
But the best leader the best prime minister Labour never had was a QC as well.
Yes,
to be an effective lawyer in Scotland and to have that as your career, you kind of have to go down that route, don't you?
Yep. Oh, actually, look in England, you can't move for solicitors either.
You're talking about John Smith?
Yeah. That's where, as I say, I think that real world experience would be useful to her at the dispatch box or with wherever. But
we have to talk about Alan Smith as well, because
we didn't really. I know his name's been mentioned, but Alan Smith and John Nicholson have got as much chance of being the leader of the SNP as I have of being the next leader of the Scottish Tories.
I could not bring myself to vote for Alan Smith.
I wasn't asking your opinion. I was just throwing in what George mentioned. You know, he gives him a whole paragraph.
Yeah, you're looking at probably 70%, maybe higher, of the female members of the party would not vote for either of these gentlemen, given the statements that they have made around GRE and women's rights. So at that point, they can't win a leadership election.
I think
it's not just going to be about a vote when you have a replacement leader, don't you? I mean, it's all about the machinations, Machiavellian, get yourself in position so you don't have any opposition.
I'm not sure it is now. I think
no in a mass member party like the SNP, you couldn't have another coronation. We've done that. We've done that, and look where it led.
You're not going to have a coronation street. If you look at George's quoting Nicola Sturgeon might as well quote Madame Pompadour, après moi le deluge. After me, the deluge. They'll be coming from all corners trying to be leader.
After me, the storm.
I think I can't see why anybody would object to the coronation that was Nicola, because she's done a fantastic job.
Yeah, well,
okay, she might well be stumbling now. Let's wait and see. But I think a coronation this time round would be difficult. And I think the reason for that is what happened with the NEC.
I'd also say what happened yesterday, mate. There were a couple of people, members, representatives, MPs and MSPs who jumped onto Twitter. And God, I didn't ken how you managed to get smugness ripping out my phone when you're on Twitter, but a couple of them managed it. They were absolutely delighted to think that they'd slapped people down and that people would be put back in their box by what happened at yesterday's National Assembly. It offends me greatly, and I'm not a party member, but it offends me greatly that people who make a living from the party, and a very well paid living at that, can use language like slapping down the members of that party. At that point, those people should be removed from their office at the next possible opportunity.
Well, it was a terribly managed, blocked event. I mean, Iain Lawson covers it, really rather well. There was, to start with, what was it? We didn't have anything like a proper conference in the autumn. And then we were promised this National Assembly to deal with the possibility of a plan B, and that was stymied by the announcement on Friday about the 11-point plan, which was nothing. And that's taken apart, completely taken apart by Kenny McAskill, because he points out that you can't possibly have a referendum this year. You've got COP26 in Glasgow in the autumn, and that's the biggest thing in the world, international thing in the world.
COP26 has got nothing to do with the Scottish government.
It's going to soak up everything. Everything.
COP26 has nothing to do with the Scottish government. Ask Boris.
Oh, that's Boris, yes.
So technically, the British government are organising that. So while they're busy organising that, let's have a referendum.
Yeah, but where are we going to get all the council officials to sit in voting booths? Well, polling stations,
you'll forgive me,
and the police and all the rest
that
of it.
argument falls down on the basis that councillors have no option other than to run an election. They can't say, "Oh, we're not having an election." The election is called by the Scottish Parliament. The election is, the returning officers turn up. It's their duty to do so. None of the local, they could greet about it. They could tell you it's a wildcat referendum. I do love the term wildcat, particularly in a country that's running out of wildcats. But it's not the place of councils to declare whether or not any referendum would be legal.
I mean, Kenny describes COP26 as the Commonwealth Games and the G7 rolled into one and then some. So basically, you're using up officials. They're like soaking up, it's like blotting paper and ink. You're soaking up all the people that you would need to organise such an election.
I think that's nonsense as well. You're using up police. That's the only thing you're using up. What officials are involved in it? It's all UK government that's organising it.
Yeah, there's a building full of them.
Aye,
Loads of them. Nothing to do. Apart sitting there spying on everything, and sending secret messages to Gordon Brown.
You remember Chogham, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Edinburgh?
That was easy, that one, compared to G7.
Aye, but all that done was create traffic jams.
Yeah, but that was in Edinburgh. Was the G7 was out at Gleneagles, and it was the whole of central Scotland involved in that. It had the roads blocked with people marching up and down, marching up from Stirling to Gleneagles and things like that.
Well, they didn't actually get anywhere near Gleneagles.
And something like 7,000 English police in the streets of Edinburgh.
Was the Gleneagles perimeter not about 5 miles away from Gleneagles?
Well, it was breached as well.
It was a couple of miles. It was a couple of miles for the hotel, Norrie, and you're right. Nobody got anywhere near.
They had to fly in some SAS because there was the perimeter was breached.
That's
nonsense,
a lie.
Man.
They didn't
Abject nonsense. If you believe that, Stuart, you're
I watched it on television. They dropped them out of a helicopter.
The SAS would have been inside the perimeter. They wouldn't be flying them up. They would have been there way before any protesters go past.
Don't you remember watching that, Jimmy?
Aye, Stuart, it was an outer perimeter, mate. They never got within a couple of miles of Gleneagles Hotel. That's not a breach. That's an annoyance to a security service that would have shot them down had they got within half a mile of the hotel.
I'll take your word for it. I've
The,
not been in the army.
SAS would have been hidden under cowpats for weeks.
Oh, that's a nice, what an image that is.
And they'd have been eating worms.
And if they needed any extra, they could have just phoned SNP HQ.
Nah, you probably
and
wouldn't
pulled,
waste
pulled
it.
them off their secretarial duties.
You probably wouldn't waste SAS on something like
So
that.
can I ask you guys if you think there's any possibility of a referendum on independence this year?
No.
It won't be to the end of the year anyway. COP's in
No, there isn't
What?
There's no
any
there's not the actual time to organise it.
Exactly.
You've got an election. You've got an election in May. Parliament meets starts up again, gets back at the end of May, and then runs for June and July, and then shuts down for August. There's no time whatsoever to organise anything.
The
They don't run
reality
in
is
July in
that,
Scotland.
that article by Kenny is what any anorak, political Scottish anorak with the ability to think knew anyway. No chance. And then you've got another year in the courts.
Well, I think Denise Finlay laid it out very clearly in that AUOB assembly last week. And she laid out all the different complications,
Yeah,
like
I mean-
Jimmy, but just expanded it a bit more. She's clearly looked things up.
You'll be lucky to see a referendum before late
Spring.
23 is I
Be
think the earliest
It'd
date.
be spring next year at the very earliest, and that would be without a court challenge by the United Kingdom government.
The only kind of referendum I think you could see then would be a referendum on having a referendum.
That's what they're looking at, an advisory referendum. And
Well,
No,
not-
I don't.
All referendums are advisory, Phil.
So we Brexit on an advisory referendum, which was full of fraud and criminal activity, etc., etc.
Well, that's my point.
We're
I mean, you're talking about advisory referendums. The one thing that Kenny McAskill does say that makes any sense to me is the only way to achieve a referendum this year is therefore to ensure the elections either a plebiscite or the SNP commits to holding a referendum this autumn, irrespective of Westminster consent.
Neither of which are going to happen after the weekend. So
No, I
Kenny's
know.
piece is already out of date.
I think you probably wrote it, but middle of last week anyway.
Let's move on to
The journey from
the Bella Caledonia piece.
the journey from
Must we?
Marxist to.
Trotskyite, if you don't mind.
Sorry, you can explain that one.
This was written by, an ex-Labour man is really how he frames himself, who's gone from the far left. I think he probably still is pretty far left.
Yeah.
But he's gone from unionist far left to nationalist. He now supports Scotland's independence. It was what I found interesting was, I think maybe there's a lot of people they maybe didn't start as extremely left as he did, are in much the same boat and traveled the same timeline to independence as he has. Certainly it applies very much to me. I mean, I was CP for long enough and then went through the Labour Party as the only party I could vote for that even told lies about the left, and ended up in the SNP. My politics are watered down. I'm not actually looking for walls to put people up against these days. But
Phil is.
sport.
it certainly mirrors my political journey. And I thought it might apply to you three as well. Jimmy?
Well, I'm still in the Labour Party, but voted independence the last time, because it's the only thing that's likely to save the Labour Party. And if you haven't a Scottish Labour Party, rather an independent Scottish Labour Party, nothing to do with south of the border, very different creature.
Jimmy?
That's a weird thing to say. It sounds like you're saying a Scottish Labour Party. How do you know what a Scottish Labour Party would be like in an independent Scotland? Why do you have to stick with Labour? It's a bit tribal.
No, well, at the end
Because
of the
he's
day,
a left winger.
Give it a
you're-
couple. The SNP
Sorry.
will split up. The SNP will split up after a while. It'll probably take 1 or 2 parliaments, and as we can see, quite a few of them don't appear to like each other.
No.
And you can see it breaking up into its component parts.
But I mean, it's just occurred to me, Labour is a peculiar label for a left-wing party. It only seems to be relevant in Australia, New Zealand, and Britain.
Why? It was the party of Labour, the party of the workers. That's where it started. Why is it a strange label?
And are you saying Australia? The Australian Labour Party's so right-wing, it can't even use its left arm.
There you go then.
joking.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. All I'm suggesting, perhaps calling it a Labour Party in Scotland may not be a brilliant idea.
I don't know. I think it would
Socialist
be-
Party, you might be better.
You're having a laugh with the connotation socialists got in this country.
No, Labour will do. You get the general idea of the direction.
As long as you don't put new in front of it, you mean?
Relatively recent Labour Party.
I struggled with the Bella piece, Norrie. I thought it was just another piece of self-aggrandisement for somebody who's heeded that far up his own fart and they can't see past the end of his own pen. Anybody that tells you he was kind of offended, his Republican sensibilities were offended at the age of 9 when the Queen attended the opening of the Scottish Parliament, is a lying bobag. There's no danger he had Republican sensibilities at 9.
I don't
I'm
know.
sorry.
I was definitely a Republican by the time I was 14. I mean,
There's a
my
big
eyes were
difference
open in
between 9 and 14, Stuart. You show me a 9-year-old that just understands republicanism and unionism.
Look, my
That
political
doesn't have an Irish accent.
my political journey started in 1956, watching Suez on the telly and watching Budapest on the telly, and I was only 10 years old then. I started developing left-wing views back then.
Yeah, I thought the whole piece was all about him, and frankly, he's just another academic, who writes about politics and doesn't live it.
I found it interesting because I can think of a few people on the left of the SNP that would have recognised
Yeah, there's
the
stuff.
steps.
There's stuff there, mate. Labour let everybody down. Labour let Scotland down a long, long time ago. And that was when, like a lot of political parties, human nature took over. The banalities of being human outweighed the principles that Labour were started under and outweighed the principles that Labour should always operate under, which is for the many, not the few. Fair play to Jeremy Corbyn, he actually got them to campaign under that slogan again. It's just by that time, it's just at that time the party has, the Labour Party has been totally hamstrung by carpetbaggers, by people who desperately need to earn money off other people's backs because they've not got the capabilities of earning it off their own back.
I think the article caught my ear because of when I read the bit, I'm old enough to personally recall the vigil for a Scottish Parliament. Because at the time I was working in the St James Oyster Bar, a pub at the bottom of Carlton Hill. And I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a homeless guy. He was quite smart. He used to wear a trilby feather on his cap and various badges, who slept in the yellow porta cabin there for quite a lot of the time. You know, they had the brazier outside and with the vigil in the yellow porta cabin. He used to come down to the St James Oyster Bar because it had a disabled toilet, which was quite a fair size. And he used to come in there and get a wash and brush up and he'd have a half pint. And from then on, I had an emotional attachment as well as a political attachment to what happened out in that porta cabin. And in fact, I was outside that cabin, standing there with my car door open, playing the radio, listening to the referendum announcements in 1997.
Well, my closest tie to it is I know somebody that was involved in it, which is Stuart McCarthy.
Yeah.
I
don't remember Stuart being there, but
he was involved. He was a big CND guy as well, Stuart.
Also remember that vigil there is the reason you don't have the Parliament on Calton Hill. Mind that saying, I think it was Dewar that they're not having a shibboleth. That was it. You know, that's why you had to go and build something new way down the road.
No,
Whereas
nonsense. The reason it didn't have a parliament of Calton Hill is because the building's too bloody wee. Take a look at the old Royal High School. It's tiny.
Oh,
How could you have a parliament on that site?
No. The school would have been the committee rooms, etc. The parliament, you wouldn't have been able to go along Regent Road, put it that way. It would have been Whitehall, if you had a look at it. A huge debating chamber would have been built where you've got the roundabout now, following that whole bit. That huge civil service building there, and the whole of that street.
They could have just bought the old post office.
Look, they were offered Leith. They were offered a building like Victoria Quay, same size. I mean, that's a brilliant building. 20 million that cost. They were guaranteed it could be built for 40 million in Leith. But
Tell you what, see what they should do. See when you get independence. Not what's his name's building down at the bottom and build it on Calton Hill.
Right at the top.
Yeah, with a big finger coming out of the top of Calton Hill.
Okay, let's have a quick round robin then. Jimmy, anything catch your eye in the papers today?
Not really, mate. I've been having a wee butchers at Twitter, all these wee Twitter spats and that. I think we're about to look at Blog Wars Mark 12 or so. So keep an eye on that this week.
Iain Lawson had a blog about Blog Wars, I think, today.
Yeah, I think his piece was mere having a go at people who like to have a go at bloggers. It was actually a really good piece. He's quite right. The sanctimonious, supercilious shitehouses that we were talking about earlier, the likes of Alan Smith and Wishy-Washy Wishart and that, who couldn't wait to come out and try and rub people's noses in it yesterday, as if they've won some kind of victory by silencing the voice of their party members. Even if it's a minority of their party members, you still listen to them. By silencing them, they think that's some kind of win. As I say, that's why people like Alan Smith and John Nicholson and that, they should be gone. People should deselect these people.
I like the way the slant of Iain Lawson's blog as well, where he points out the more these people attack him and come onto because Iain Lawson plants his story in various controversial groups on Facebook, which attract a lot of bile. And as he said, when that happens, his readership goes up. Yeah. And he references Wings, Stu Campbell's blog, which is clearly the most successful blog in Scotland.
Oh, by a country mile.
Yeah, and it's attacked and attacked and attacked. And the more they attack it, the more popular it becomes.
Phil, anything catch your eye?
Yeah, just again, it's the guy Conor Matchett in The Scotsman. I've been watching The Scotsman, just this little subtle move along. You know, it's actually comes under what you would call pretty decent reporting. And it's the meeting of the dinosaurs. Gordon Brown with Michael Gove, how they're going to take on Scottish independence. You know, you think, does he not learn? I mean, has he spent the last umpteen years sitting in his shed at the bottom of the garden, counting his wealth in pound coins or something? I mean, really, all I need to say is go away. Well, Mr. Gordon Brown, just please go away.
Gordon Brown is not concerned with anything with Gordon Brown. He's not concerned with the Labour Party. I think all he's worried about is not getting a knighthood.
He's obsessed with legacy. He's obsessed because he doesn't have one, and he desperately wants one.
And he doesn't have the intellect either to get it. His view of himself, and I mean, as Chancellor and all that. I mean, he was a complete disaster. Haas Health Board to fork out humongous amounts of money to private consortiums for building them crap buildings, all the rest of that. That was about his legacy to make him look fiscally responsible because it didn't go on his borrowing sheet. And then the hissy fits, I want to be leader. Blair was the same, you know, but exactly.
Well, we have a mainstream media, particularly the BBC, it has to be said. I mean, they've had, Gordon Brown must have phone numbers for contact numbers for everybody in BBC Scotland and a lot in London, because he's never off these days. He was on Radio 4 this morning. He's been on various news outlets over the last few days. Why on earth does London insist on putting out content about Scotland that knows nothing about Scotland, with commentators who know nothing about Scotland? The fact that they may be from here doesn't make them in any way pertinent to what's going on. You know, if they come on to the BBC and tell you, yeah, you know, Scotland's not going to want independence, Scotland doesn't want another divisive independence referendum, that opinion alone should automatically bar you for appearing on BBC, because it shows that you're a dipshit.
Yeah, but but the reason that comes from London is because that green ink beret ink group, they actually listen to Radio 4 and the Archers. They think they're British.
I listen to Radio 4. Cheeky bugger.
So do I, but I don't listen to the Archers. And by the way, the word is Bringlish. In Irish, it's Shoneen. It's those people that just identified with their abuser, user, etc.
Is the fact of the matter not really that it has to be Gordon Brown by default, because there isn't anybody else?
Well, they've not got anybody to argue the case. They're desperate. I mean, they genuinely think if Gordon Brown comes out and heads a no campaign, he'll win.
Yeah, no.
They genuinely think he's respected up here. He's never been respected up here since he was Chancellor.
Gordon Brown can he? I mean, well, I hope he does lead the no campaign.
Yeah, me too.
But I mean, Gordon Brown is never good on face-to-face. Can you imagine him in a debate? When was the last time you saw Gordon Brown actually debate anything?
No, he wouldn't debate anyone.
I always think of Gordon Brown as a clunking fist. That's how I always remember.
He's a man that needs to be transported in a couple of buses because he needs his audience to be there with him. It has to be handpicked, and they have to be, they have to have been coached into when to burst into spontaneous applause.
I think that's what they do with the Labour Party in Scotland. I remember interviewing Miliband and out at Newton Grange, and they bust in all these people into the Newton Grange,
the Miners' Museum.
Miners' Museum place, and it's like I wanted to stand up and ask something controversial, but I knew I looked round and I was a waste of time. I was just going to get shouted down.
You're on a groupie anyway. Bus, then, will you?
Sorry?
A groupie bus.
He's already made the error that will follow him through any campaign.
Well, the sandwich.
Gordon
Brown.
Sandwich. No, Gordon Brown.
No, Gordon Brown. Oh, right.
Because he's gone down and spoken to Gove.
Yeah.
Well,
it has to be said, they must have, it's a very specialist environment that you'd have to put they two in the same room. It'd need to be about 80 degrees in there, or the slime would ooze out under the bottom of the door.
Actually, get on quite well. I'm not being crude at, but you know, two cheeks are the same. Yeah.
Aye. Nah, actually.
Jimmy will fill in that space.
Yeah, well, I'd actually say they're the sphincter between the two cheeks of the same arse, mate.
Right, guys.
Although sphincter's occasionally useful, and neither of them have proved to be that.
Nice.
I have you a really interesting little tidbit. I happened to be watching Click on BBC last night. That's the sort of tech show. And we all use social media very heavily, some of us. And it turns out that the new Biden administration is going to take on the tech giants, Google, Facebook. I'm not sure how they're going to get on. But apparently there is still existing antitrust laws, which they could use to break up Google. They're going to try and break up Google and Facebook, but what do you reckon with the money they've got and the influence they can impose? What do you think their chances are?
Well, he better hope that Google and Facebook don't decide to get together, because they'll be bigger than America if they do.
Well, the problem is got to try to take either of them on, mate. What happens if they both turn around and say, you know what, we're moving offshore, and that we're going to remove, about 80,000 extremely highly paid jobs from the Simi Valley and what have you, in
Where are they going to go?
They just go offshore,
Wales.
mate. The other servers and
Nostalgia.
everything, they could run their servers from the cloud. They didn't need to go anywhere.
Yeah, but
Did-
can I just throw into something into the mix? The SWP claimed they got shut down by Facebook a few days ago.
Don't care.
Does SWP still exist?
Yeah.
Did you see that, Phil? You should know about that.
All that happened about a week or so ago, yeah.
Don't care.
I've got to say, I thought they'd gone a long time ago. They were an interesting bunch of non-conformist conformers, weren't they?
Excuse me, they're on the road to independence, mate. Don't slag them.
They're on the road to what?
Independence.
Nah, mate, they might be sliding down the cyber on a road to independence.
Tommy was SWP, wasn't he?
Oh, they were all years ago. SWP's dead. In fact, they have their annual general meeting in the British Museum. There's a few of them, you know what I mean? You can just see them. They're just in one exhibit.
All right, well, Phil, which is it? What's the big left-wing party these days then?
In Scotland.
Well, not in the UK, I don't know.
It's the
The
SNP.
SSP still.
Well, the SSP, I couldn't tell you. Maybe it was the SSP has been shut down.
That was Sheriff's Colin and used to be Sheridan. And then I suppose.
No, not in Scotland. It was definitely London that they were greeting yesterday and the day before about being Facebook shutting them down.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of Swappo up here. I used to call them Swappo, Southwest African peoples, because it was kind of derogatory. They thought they were such revolutionaries. Well, Swappo, yeah. But I think it went down the tube because, you'll never believe it. I think it was, left-wing misogyny. You know what I mean?
Didn't they have a bit of infighting, no?
No, a lot of
Did
sexist
they not just all get old?
and all the rest of it, yeah. Usual thing in far left.
I
Right,
thought they all
guys.
just-
That's
Aye.
like, whoa, way over time. Jimmy, last word.
No, I didn't have any. I was just going to say I thought the SWP all just grew at it.
They all got long trousers. Went
Aye.
home. Okay, guys, we'll call it a day to that. Thanks, Jimmy Hutton, Phil Attridge, Stuart Lockhead.
Video.
I'm Norrie Stewart. And thanks for listening and watching, folks. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers.